Ross, say something witty.
Pressure's on.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plump. I'm a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, paleogeneticist looking at Pleistocene megafauna.
And today we are reviewing The Lost City from 2022. That's a weird way to say that. I haven't said 2000 in a long time. From 2022. Starring Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. Who wants to summarize this movie?
I can.
Yeah.
Unless you want to, okay. Ross, you can.
No, I'm happy for Kim to do it.
Well, I love Sandra Bullock, and I like Channing Tatum. So the premise is that Sandra Bullock is a romance novelist, and she writes this series of really popular romance novels starring Loretta Lovelorn or something like that. And then her cover model, who is played by Channing Tatum, and he is Dash, the beautiful man with the Fabio type guy that you see on those covers, right, with the long blonde wig and everything. But you meet Sandra Bullock and you get the impression right away that she's, and the same as her other roles in Miss Congeniality and all that, she's the grumpy, doesn't actually want to be doing any of the stuff she has to do person. And they put her in this purple sequence jumpsuit that she doesn't like, and then she has to go and give a talk about her book with Dash. And she's just so annoyed at everything that she says that it's going to be her last book and she's going to kill off the character Dash. And her publicist isn't very happy. And it's obvious that she's in this, she doesn't like where her life got her. She doesn't like where her career is right now. She's not happy that she's a novelist, a romance novelist. And then she goes back to her hotel, I guess, or something. I forget where she was. And then gets kidnapped. So she gets pulled into a car and she gets taken to this building, and then evil Harry Potter is there. And he turns out to be this ultimate rich guy that has a lot to prove. And what he wants to do is find this archaeological artifact that's supposed to be really worth a ton of money. It's the Crown of Fire, and it's made out of red jewels. And he read in her book that in one of the books, I think her book was called The Lost City, where she actually deciphers some of the ancient text and deciphers it and uses that within the about the Crown of Fire within her story. But he notices that the text that she uses, the ancient text, is actually real, and that's what he has a piece of, an ancient scroll with some of the writing on it, telling him where the treasure is. And so he looks into her background. It turns out that it wasn't clear whether she used to be an archaeologist or her husband used to be an archaeologist, or both.
I think her husband was an archaeologist specializing in this culture of D, and she was she started but never finished.
Right, so she was a grad student or something.
Yeah, they said she was doing her dissertation on it.
Right, so they used to do the archaeology together, but then he died, you find out, and then she quit her research after he died and left archaeology and was making a lot of money doing this romance novelist. So the rich guy said, since you can decipher this text, I'm going to kidnap you and take you to the island in the Atlantic. Isla, what was it called? Isla, I forget.
I wrote it down. Hold on.
I don't know if it was a real island. You didn't sound real, but...
No.
I didn't write it down. Yeah, I looked it up, though. It's not a real island. Yeah. Pretty much everything, all the facts are fictional in this movie.
Yeah. So... some tropical island with a volcano in the center. It looks very Lost City, all the old movies that we've watched before, right? And so he takes her there and he kidnaps her and ties her up and makes her decipher the scroll. And so she does, but there's obviously key words missing, so she can't tell him exactly where the crown is buried or where the tomb is. He gets really mad. But this entire time, Channing Tatum has decided that he wants to be more like Dash than he is. He doesn't want to just be a model. He wants to be more like the hero. And so he takes this opportunity to try and save Sandra. And so he gets in touch with a friend that he met through yoga, who is a like ex-military trainer guy who turns out to be Brad Pitt. And he does actually have like the long blonde hair, and he is like what Dash is, the character. And so he goes with this Brad Pitt guy, and Brad Pitt guy is like everything you would expect, like puts guys in sleeper holds, can take out 4 guys at one time, like a hero. And Channing Tatum's, it's like the comic relief where he isn't really doing anything. He slaps a couple of unconscious guys. They finally save Sandra Bullock, and then I guess we have spoilers in the show, and then very quickly Brad Pitt's head gets blown off, which I did not see coming. So then just Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock are now alone in the jungle, and neither of them like are survivalists like Brad Pitt, but he's dead now. So they have to get through the jungle. They lose their car in an accident. They lose everything that they have in an accident. And then the bad guys are still after them because she stole the piece of scroll. So they can't even just let her go because she still has the piece of scroll. So now they're after her. So they're running through the jungle and they keep getting found. And they do this one scene where they go into a river and then Channing Tatum has leeches all over him. And so it's an opportunity to just show really for long periods of time close-ups of his very nice bum. So it was kind of nice after all those movies of like the bouncy breasts and the tiny little bikini tops and stuff. I was like, yeah, okay. Eventually they get to a resort, right? So they finally get to civilization. They think that they're safe. Then she hears a local lady singing a song about the Well of Tears, which is what was on the scroll. Like the tomb was in the Well of Tears. Oh no, sorry. They also randomly when they're in a waterfall running from the guys, they randomly found a wall that has the inscription of the scroll. And so she was able to read what was missing. So that was very nice that they happened upon that one piece of wall that had that inscription. So she knows that it's buried in the Well of Endless Tears. And she hears it in the song title. So she goes and asks the lady, like, where is this Well of Endless Tears? And so she actually tells her where it is. And so Channing Tatum and her decide that instead of just going home and being safe, they're actually going to continue this adventure and go and see if they can actually find it and be the adventurers that they are in her books. And then at this point, the bad guy comes back, finds her, and kidnaps her again, and is going to take her to the Endless Well of Tears because now he knows that she knows where it is. Channing Tatum comes and saves them. He actually does action hero stuff now, and it gets saves her, but it's not enough. So now the bad guy has both of them. They go into the volcano. They find the tomb. It's absolutely beautiful. It's like this lost city inside a volcano. This beautiful tomb. It's absolutely gorgeous. Everything that your imagination would want it to be. They open the tomb, and the crown of fire is just red seashells. Or they're not even red anymore. But so she reads on the wall that it's not jewels, it's not rubies. It was just red seashells that her husband had picked one a day for her while they were courting and made a crown for her. And that the treasure that was buried was their love together because they were holding each other, their skeletons in the tomb. It's all very sweet. Harry Potter is very mad at this and angry, puts them in the tomb to die. Luckily, his henchman doesn't think this is cool, so he slips in a crowbar into the tomb while they're getting locked in so they can actually escape. They finally escape. The publisher that had been left in New York and then found her way over to the island shows up in a boat, captures Harry Potter, saves them. They finally admit that they love each other, Sandra and Channing Tatum. Then it ends with them being in the yoga retreat back in LA, I guess, and Brad Pitt is alive. In
a mid-credit scene, isn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is good because he was the best character, I think.
Yeah, he was awesome.
By a long shot.
It was funny when his head got blown off, though, because I just did not see that. Usually these movies are so formulaic that you're like, you're not ready to be surprised, and you're like, oh my God. I thought that was good.
Well, we've got pretty good archaeology movie here. We should have enough archaeology to talk about. What I really like about this one, though, is that it's got this like meta level to it where she is an archaeology fiction writer, and we're watching archaeology fiction in the world where she writes archaeology fiction. So it starts off with this scene where her characters are trapped in some sort of tomb by a bad guy, and there's snakes all around, and it turns out she's writing the scene as we're watching it, and Dash is like, why are all these snakes here? Like, are these your snakes? Which is like literally a scene out of Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
They go into the tomb and it's full of snakes. Like, why are there snakes? So I mean, it's like telling us right from the beginning, like, archaeology fiction is ridiculous, so that everything that follows in the movie, we should expect it to be ridiculous, which nice for criticizing it, because I mean, it's hard to tear it apart after it tells us that it's going to be stupid, right?
We can still try.
Yeah.
Well, like we said, all the details in the actual movie are fictional, like the culture and the island and the whatever he was, the king or whatever, and his wife, they're not real things. The crown of fire is not a real thing. So what can we nitpick in this one? Are there any details that we can pick apart?
Yeah, well, the one that bugged me the most is that they made very clear that this was like a Mesoamerican kind of culture, but all the kind of stylings were clearly Egyptian based. So like the hieroglyphics and the even the kind of style of carvings and the kind of postures of the figures in the carvings were very Egyptian styled. When there's such a fantastic kind of and distinctive kind of history of Mesoamerican and South American art, that there was absolutely no need to get that wrong. It didn't add anything to make it kind of look more Egyptian than like Aztec or Maya or Inca or whatever. It just seemed like a bit of kind of laziness on their part.
Yeah, I thought the same.
The other thing is that the sort of, not really a MacGuffin, the little artifact at the center of this is a piece of fabric or paper or something with the thing written on it. And I didn't really think about this until this moment, but you said how she found the rest of that piece written, like carved into a wall. So was this piece of paper an original artifact, or was that a copy of some Spanish explorer later or something? Because a Mesoamerican or South American culture wouldn't have had paper for writing, right?
No, that makes more sense. I hadn't thought about that either, but yeah, if it's a later kind of codex fragment or something.
Although if it was, you'd probably think there'd be some fragments of English surrounding it, or Spanish or whatever, right?
Yeah. But then there wouldn't be a MacGuffin. But what I thought was quite nice, as Kim says, is that there is no treasure in this film. So in that sense, it's actually quite a nice story. It's about the problems that modern people have with interpreting the past. Like, what treasure to one culture is not what we think of as treasure today. And I thought that was really neat. I didn't expect to like this film as much as I did. I mean, it's fun. And it's an easy watch, and it's got some quite cool ideas in it, which made it really enjoyable, I think, and much more than I expected. Channing Tatum was great as a kind of total himbo. Sandra Bullock's always good. Brad Pitt was amazing as what was it he called? He was called
Trainer.
Jack Trainer.
Jack Trainer. Sorry, yeah, Jack Trainer, who was a yoga trainer, who was just like the real Dash. And I got the impression that Brad Pitt put quite a lot of himself into this kind of stoner yoga character, which was quite fun. And evil Harry Potter, he's quite good too.
He's really good at playing like crazy asshole characters.
Yeah.
There was another movie recently that he was similar guy that I watched. Maybe it's not a recent movie, but I watched it recently, where he's this rich guy who wants something weird and makes people do crazy things.
Yeah, that's in the trivia in IMDb. I remember reading a comment about how he played an evil billionaire in this movie and one other movie, and I remember thinking, that's not really very interesting trivia.
But yeah, Daniel Radcliffe's just he's having a great time. He doesn't need to work for money because he's got enough of it from Harry Potter and all those films. So he's just doing stuff that he wants to do, which is great because he's clearly having fun.
Yeah. I liked it, good jokes too, when she first saw Brad Pitt, like when he was rescuing her and taking the moment that Channing Tatum wanted, right? And she just looks at him and she's like,
now.
Yeah, you're safe now. And she's like, how did you get so handsome? Or why are you so handsome? And he was like, my father was a weatherman.
Yeah. That was a great line. I really laughed out loud at that one. Oh, dear.
Okay, so this movie is largely inspired by Romancing the Stone, which I haven't seen. Have either of you seen that one?
I've seen it like 30 years ago or something.
Is that the one with Brooke Shields?
So I can't remember anything. except the Billy Ocean song, and it's got Danny DeVito and Michael Douglas in it, and I think Kathleen Turner.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't seen it, but I understand Romancing the Stone was just an attempt to capitalize, or maybe not just an attempt. It was an attempt to capitalize on Indiana Jones. It came out just shortly after the first Indiana Jones. So we have similarities in this movie between Romancing the Stone and like all the Indiana Jones. And so it's like firmly in that genre. And the story isn't really that like unique, but what sells it for me is the idea that she is an archaeology romance author. So it's like sort of making fun of itself. It's making fun of itself and therefore all of its inspiration as well at the same time, which is pretty neat. There's other inspiration as well. So the movie is called The Lost City, but the book that Sandra Bullock's character Loretta is selling or promoting at the beginning is The Lost City of D, which is funny enough on its own, but it's even more funny if you realize that's inspired by the real life myth of the Lost City of Z, or the Lost City of Zed, right?
Yeah.
Which I believe Brad Pitt or somebody else in this movie had some sort of connection to the movie based on that, which came out in 2016, the movie called The Lost City of Zed.
Yep. I think Brad Pitt's in that, possibly. But yeah, Lost City of D, obviously that's a double entendre, but there was some very funny double entendres building on that in the film. With Daniel Radcliffe, did really well to keep a straight face while he's explaining how he discovered the Lost City of D, that because of the volcano, the D exposed itself, but just the tip. Oh dear. Yeah, that was lowbrow, but very funny, I thought.
Yes, I think that the amount of dick jokes were tasteful and just the right amount.
Just the right amount.
And you got the feeling that they knew that they were kind of dorky too, and just having fun with it anyways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Sandra Bullock. I always get the impression that she would be a fun person to hang out with.
Yeah. Same with Channing Tatum.
Yeah. Have you guys seen This Is the End, where Channing Tatum is a gimp?
Yes. So good.
That's quite funny.
Yeah.
No, if you'd seen it, you'd remember for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's quite good at taking the piss out of himself, which is a very endearing character trait, I always find. And
in This Is the End, he's not just playing a gimp, he's playing himself being a gimp, like who's turned. Yeah. He is Channing Tatum, who after this Armageddon thing is now a gimp to survive, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do any of us know about the type of myths of lost cities in the Americas that this is obviously drawing from? So we have the story of the lost city of Zed. We have the story of El Dorado, which are kind of similar. Do any of us know anything about those stories?
Well,
just from the cartoon.
Yeah. Kind of classic. Just a kind of, misunderstood idea that there was a whole city made of gold, which obviously the conquistadors were keen to find. But again, like in the film, I think the current thinking is that it's just a misunderstanding of what the actual people were trying to express. That it wasn't a city of gold so much as a kind of symbolic place where ceremonies involving kind of gold dust and a cenote were performed, and this got kind of lost in translation, and all the kind of gold lusting colonizers wanted to find something that wasn't even real, and many people sort of set off to find it and then got eaten by the jungle, essentially. I guess Machu Picchu as well sort of could fall into this category a little bit, in that it was kind of abandoned and mostly forgotten about until it was rediscovered by accident.
Lots of older things like Troy would fall under that as well, because Troy was sort of a mythical city, and I believe it was actually found by Heinrich Schliemann.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if we've ever talked about Heinrich Schliemann. I don't know if I know enough to do that story justice, but does anybody know that story of him finding Troy?
Just the basics.
Just that, right? Didn't he used the kind of essentially built a map from the Iliad and used that to kind of work out where it could be, and then just dug.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe he dug straight through it, because when he hit it, which nobody was expecting him to do, he didn't recognize that it was Troy, and so he kind of destroyed a lot of it in the process of digging it up, didn't he?
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
I believe Heinrich Schliemann liked to dig with dynamite. Is that the guy?
I think so. And then I think he also reconstructed things, buildings and such, but based on what he wanted them to look like more so than...
Mm-hmm.
So he'd, get them to rebuild what was fallen down or destroyed, but based on what he wanted it to look like, not based on what the evidence suggested it looked like.
That's standard for those times, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Then the lost city of Zed is, I think, closely related to El Dorado, because there was this English soldier back in the day when soldiers could somehow also just lead their own archaeological missions because they wanted to. I'm not sure how it worked, but not like a infantryman, like some sort of, he started off as a high society guy and got some position in the army, and then was interested in exploring South America, but then World War I broke out, and then after World War I somehow put together this team, because I think it was based on an early explorer's description of an archaeological ruin that he found, but didn't give a location. So he took this expedition to South America to try and find this lost city, which he called Zed. And his first trip failed. He had to shoot his horse and eat it or something like that to survive. And then later on went on a second mission with his son, and they never came back. And there's a movie made about them called The Lost City of Zed, which speculates on what happens after they went missing, which I suppose we could do that one at a later time as well. It's probably on our list. But never found it, although an archaeological ruin in the vicinity where they were supposed to be looking was discovered in the 1920s, I think. And today, with LiDAR, which I always forget what it means, light detection and ranging, we're discovering all kinds of ancient cities in the Amazon jungle. So all these stories about these lost cities probably are based on either actual archaeological sites that people found or oral history being passed down. So that's interesting. But I don't really know anything about any of these lost cities, these lost civilizations in the Amazon.
No, neither. I doubt that there's one in the center of a volcano, though.
Well, they said that the island is in the middle of the Atlantic, and it makes more sense that it would be in the Caribbean, but there's not a lot of islands in the middle of the Atlantic, right?
No, because it's an active fault zone.
Mm-hmm.
There's Diego Garcia and I think Tristan da Cunha, St. Helena, a few spots here and there, but how did people get there to create a lost city?
Mm-hmm. Plus all the materials and workmen and all of that would be needed to build a temple in the middle of the volcano. And then again, like most archaeological movies, it was all destroyed in the end, right?
Yeah.
With not a single note taken or measurement or sketch made or photograph.
No.
But this movie has some very brief thoughts sort of about the ethics of archaeology, and the idea that it was destroyed in the end kind of was the point. There's the now older Indiana Jones philosophy of it belongs in a museum, which, historically means it belongs in a European or an American museum, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, they find the tomb and they discover that the whole point of the tomb was because the queen was sad and she wanted to isolate herself and she didn't want anybody to disturb her. And so in the end, what they decide to do is to not disturb her, which is, contrary to the traditional way that we see archaeology as preserving things by excavating them and removing them. But in this case, it's preserving the burial, preserving the culture by intentionally not disturbing it. Not that they could have, because the volcano destroyed it, so it's not like they had the option to excavate it. But this is also alluded to earlier when one of Abigail's henchmen, one of Daniel Radcliffe's henchmen, is an indigenous local to the island, and he says that Raffi doesn't, when he's talking about the excavation, he says Raffi doesn't like it. He says we're disrespecting his heritage. And then in the end, Raffi is the guy who left the crowbar in the coffin with them so that they could get out.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't get any deeper than that in the movie, but I like this idea that there is this sort of quiet battle going on inside this guy where, you know, he's making money and he's got a job to do, but it conflicts with his cultural connection to the past. And in the end, he does the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm. And he takes off with the boat and leaves Harry Potter stranded to get caught by everybody.
Yeah, I guess it depends what your definition of the right thing is. I mean, it might also be the right thing to leave Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum in the tomb that they were trying to find against the express wishes of the local population, and which they crowbarred open in the hope of finding treasure.
That is true.
If he just left them there and they got covered by a volcano, that would also possibly be the right thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very much like Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know, it depends from a certain point of view.
I guess that's always how it is in archaeological ethics.
Yeah.
It would be so interesting, though, as an archaeologist, to find that like hundreds of years later and then have it be like 2 skeletons from a certain time period. And then on top of that is 2 other skeletons from another time period with a crowbar. Like, it'd be such an interesting find.
Encased in lava.
Yeah.
Something else that we could talk about in this movie is the real life illegal antiquities trade, because that's basically what's happening here. There isn't real archaeology. There is a rich guy trying to find a treasure that he wants because he's so rich he can have anything he wants. And what he really wants is to have one-of-a-kind things where nobody else can beat him and he can one-up his brother, essentially, is where all of his motivation comes from. But so one of the things that caught my attention is he said that he bought the entire island once he discovered that the ruin was there, so that ostensibly he can do whatever he wants with it. But if a billionaire bought an entire island with an archaeological site on it, it still wouldn't be legal. Like, they wouldn't own the artifacts, because pretty much every country is going to have laws about what happens with its archaeological heritage. So unless like he bought the island from a country and now it's his own country, but even so, if you were to buy your own island and turn it into your own country, would it still be legal to own the archaeological heritage of that island according to international conventions? Does anybody know anything about that?
I think it all depends on the government. Yeah, I think it's the individual government.
Also, I mean, you have to look at the kind of real politic of this, in that if a country is willing to sell an island to a corrupt billionaire, then they're also going to be not averse, probably, to looking the other way when he wants to export antiquities out of the island. That would be the reality of it.
I didn't have that much time to dig into this, but I came upon something called the UNESCO 1970 Convention on the Means of Prohibiting and Preventing the Illicit Import, Export, and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property, which I think is what would be governing this, but I don't know exactly how it applies, because I'd never actually heard of it before.
It's a catchy title.
Yeah. Well, the Wikipedia page is just UNESCO 1970 Convention, so I think maybe that's the abbreviation.
I know that certainly, I can't speak for issues in other parts of the world, but definitely in Scotland, where there's been a long history of, we've got lots of islands on the west coast which had indigenous working populations, which were essentially sold to rich landlords from England, usually, or abroad, and then mismanaged horrifically, and that, they could just do what they wanted. It didn't matter what the rules were. They were the landlord. What they said was the law, to the detriment of the people living there.
I suppose regardless of whatever the international conventions are, if you're a billionaire who can afford to buy an island, you can probably figure out how to get around anything related to the antiquities trade.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and probably grease enough palms that it just goes through.
Or hire enough lawyers that they could just lobby to get the laws changed.
Yeah.
That would be a route as well. Back to archaeology, the nice tomb of the king and the queen with the crown of fire. Did anyone think that might have been based on real burials, like the Lovers of Valdaro, which is quite
That's
famous? So for anyone that doesn't know the Lovers of Valdaro, and I'm not just reading this off Wikipedia, There are a pair of human skeletons dated to approximately 6,000 years old from a Neolithic tomb in Mantua, Italy. And it's essentially the pose is the same as in the film, that just two skeletons would basically hugging, which is a very kind of emotive image, I think. As Kim said earlier, it's quite affecting that you have these two skeletons kind of locked together in a permanent embrace. But I think there are other ones, including, I think, examples of two male skeletons found like in embrace. Anyone heard of that one?
Yeah, we've heard of it because there was that whole argument like that one of them must have been sexed incorrectly.
Yeah, it's the Lovers of Medina is the ones I'm thinking of, that also found in Italy, but much later, so between the 4th and 6th century AD. And again, archaeology being informed by current thinkings, that they were assumed to be male and female, but later were discovered to be two males, which is interesting.
Well, it's a good example when you're teaching archaeology students about how your cultural bias or perception can impact how you interpret your data, right?
Yeah.
The skeletons in this were actually pretty good. Usually they're horrible, but these ones they looked real, actually, and well laid out.
I thought it was a little weird that they were, the coffin that they were in was halfway full of sand, so that they were sort of half buried and half exposed. I'm not sure where the sand came from that they got buried inside their coffin.
I thought that was pretty realistic.
Really?
Yeah. Like, you'd expect, it's not a good seal. You'd expect there to be stuff blowing in all the time.
But she died after him, right? So what I was thinking was maybe because his body would have been interred, and then everything built because she had that space built so that she could go and mourn him, and then she would have died, and then they would have put her in. So maybe they filled it with sand and laid it out so that they could embrace, because otherwise it would be just his skeleton and then her body laying on top, right?
Yeah,
maybe
that must have been quite tricky. Like, basically, you have a freshly dead queen and a skeletonized king, and you have to somehow pose them so that one is
holding the other,
basically cuddling the skeleton.
Yeah.
That's
so filling
macabre.
it with sand and burying, laying him out in sand and then putting her on top would be a genius way of doing it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's how you do it. So that's what I thought.
They'd have to pose did they bury his skeleton halfway so that it was holding the human body shape though? Because I just, they would have had to reconnect his skeleton somehow to get him to hold his shape. So they
could have just paid attention.
They buried him halfway in the sand and then cut a little human shaped recess for her and then let her sit in that.
Or they just paid attention to the anatomy of the skeleton and then just made sure to put it exactly as they found it.
It may have been partially mummified, I guess. That could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it also depends on how much longer he had been dead for than her, right?
Yeah. It must have been a reasonable amount of time for her to be able to make all the kind of tomb surroundings and the carvings and do all the brooding that she seems to have done.
Yeah, I would assume he'd be skeletonized.
I think we're overthinking it. I think the movie definitely wants us to think that he died and she laid down with his still warm corpse and died alongside him in the tomb that she had made in the past 6 hours before his body got cold.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess it's possible that they could have prepared the tomb well in advance while they were both alive, like many of the Egyptian pharaohs did.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they died pretty close to each other, she may have had time for some brooding, and then instructed the scribes to fill in the text on the walls. But yeah, we're overthinking this for sure. But I mean, the examples we talked about, the lovers of Medina and the lovers of Valdaro, the assumption is that they died at the same time, or at least very close together in time, so they would have still been fully fleshed corpses when they were interred, or that they died simultaneously by some kind of
romantic thing.
Yeah, like I guess poison, or they were like Pompeii. There's examples of people embracing as they're kind of covered with the pyroclastic flow, and it kind of preserves them like that.
One thing that we can talk about is at the beginning of the movie, Loretta is starting a book tour for her latest book. Ross, you've written a book. Is this your experience when you're putting out your newest book? Do you go on a book tour and your publicist makes you wear a sequin jumpsuit?
Yeah, my jumpsuit was pink, not purple, but otherwise exactly the same. No, I mean clearly, yeah, I can see it looked. You imagine like a Dan Brown or try to think of a popular
Daniel Steele
kind of trashy author, yeah, Daniel Steele or Joan Collins or someone like that. That if they were doing a book tour, then that's the kind of thing that would definitely happen. And I know some proper authors that do like worldwide book tours, and yeah, they get well looked after, and they get kind of prodded and manhandled by their agents and by their managers to make sure that they're doing everything physically possible to sell every last copy of their new publication.
and the romance novel readers, it's almost like cult followings for certain series. Like when I worked at a bookstore in my undergrad, and people would know when the next book was coming out, like what day, and they would show up at the store as it opened for their copy. Right?
Yeah.
And it was only the romance novelists that happened for. So
yeah.
So
like
hardcore
whenever
fans.
Anne Rice releases a new book, there's like stories in the newspapers and kind of retrospectives of her output and all that kind of stuff. And certainly, I work in a library at the minute, and yeah, as Kim was saying, exactly, that you have the fans of the kind of Mills and Boon style romances who have read all of them, like the whole shelf worth. They've read them all, and that's all they read. And they just complain constantly about how there's not any new ones.
What about Sandra Bullock's character as this trashy romance author? Because the books are supposed to be like trashy romance, but as she's writing them, you can tell she's putting emphasis into like the academic side. In the first scene, Dash describes himself as having 2 doctorates and a master's in gender studies, right?
Yeah.
And then she later describes herself as a sapiosexual, actually, in her presentation for her book tour. So it seems kind of weird to me that all of her fans are really interested in the trashy romance, but it seems like she's obviously putting real life archaeology stuff into the books. I was kind of thinking if she might be based a little bit on Kathy Reichs, who is a forensic anthropologist who the Bones TV show is based on.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. Or I guess the other potential is like John Uhl, who does the Clan of the Cavery books, who has does a lot of research into the time periods and the actual archaeology and paleontology, but the books are not bodice ripping because they didn't have bodices back then, but furs ripping and there's a lot of procreating going on. But I guess that my impression was that's why she was so frustrated as a character, is that she wanted to be a serious author and write kind of serious books, but these ones sold well, and so there's that kind of clash, that antagonism between her clearly being super smart and knowing a lot, but her money comes from sort of selling out that part to the kind of trashier side. But I don't know. I mean, I would probably read those books if they existed. They sound like fun. With what the characters Dash and Lovemore.
Right. And she made a comment like the reason why she started to write these novels was because her book on the Spanish colonization of the Atlantic didn't get picked up by the publisher or didn't sell or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were some nice touches like that where, I was sure, I know for certain that there's more than one PhD that's finished and decided to move sideways into writing of books.
Make more money.
Or any money.
Any money.
I also really like the movie, but one little tiny thing that kind of bothers me about it, like we have a strong female character who is, like you said, super smart, but she was doing her dissertation and then her husband died and then she quit.
Yeah, I know.
And would you ever have a male character doing his dissertation and then his partner died and then he quit doing it? It doesn't seem like, it seems like that's a very woman-specific character trait to have.
Yeah, and then even with the research and stuff, it was all very much of like, this is your husband's legacy. This is your husband doing this. This is your husband. Like, it was kind of pushed like she was just with him, like just helping him.
Mm-hmm.
Which maybe if he was a professor and she was a grad student, then maybe that's what was the dynamic. But it just like, you don't assume that, and you don't diminish her work just because she was at a younger stage academically.
To be fair, I think there are cases, or there is a sort of trope of, you know, a heartbroken widower who gives everything up and just becomes a kind of drunk recluse after his partner dies. That I've definitely seen that in some films. In fact, I watched a film yesterday that had that kind of trope.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe
that's true.
Being slightly unfair to the writers to say it's sexist.
It is an issue in archaeology and anthropology, though, because as you get like at the undergrad levels, like the classes I'm teaching are like 75% women, and then as you get up through grad school, the proportions even out. So it seems like more women are getting into it than men, but they're not sticking through at the same rates that men do. And
when you get even higher, it's worse.
Mm-hmm. And I think that there's an expectation on women that, you know, you don't follow it through all the way because your like life choices, like having kids or things like that, still factor into it, which I mean, I haven't read that much on this phenomenon lately, but it seems to be the case to me.
I think, well, I don't want to talk over anyone, but I think it's very complicated, the idea of the leaky pipeline, and, you know, it essentially there's not the support and there's not the opportunities given to the people that are moving up. You know, it's not a meritocracy when it's sold as being a meritocracy. And if there are any calls on your time, then that is going to impact it. And unfairly, and in our kind of Western culture, it seems to be that when there are calls on a person's time from a family or from commitments that are non-academic, then the assumption is always that it'll be the woman that kind of takes up that extra work. And it's not changing fast enough that, you know, there's a lot of incredible talent that's being wasted because, like you say, like the starting numbers are there, but this kind of leaky pipeline disappears because people are not getting the support that they need to fully make it a meritocratic exercise. And the fault there lies on the organizations, the academic organizations and the universities that are not supporting people in the way that they should, or they're putting in place kind of hurdles and gates that preferentially are easier for males to pass through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a very long-winded way of saying that this is bad and that we need to try and sort it out because it's not good.
Yeah. It's 2023. Let's get this sorted.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any more notes. Does anybody have any more notes?
I think I just wrote down more of the dick jokes. I think that was all I have in my notes. One thing. So the waterfall where they find the writing after they've spent 5-10 minutes looking at Channing Tatum's arse pulling leeches off, and he turns around because he's got some on his. He doesn't have any on his front, but he needs Sandra Bullock to check it out, which he does. I thought that waterfall may have been the same location as the waterfall in Jurassic Park, where they find where they go to the amber mine.
Oh,
I don't know how we looked that up, but that I thought I recognized it from that, but I could be wrong.
Jurassic Park was mostly filmed in Hawaii, and this one I think was filmed in Belize.
Okay.
But if you're thinking about the amber mine at the beginning, I don't know if that was filmed in the same location as everything else was.
Oh well. I thought that the Channing Tatum character, he was a himbo, but he had a good heart, and that was nice. They didn't make him totally one-dimensional. He was he wasn't very smart, but he was endearing and he was thoughtful and caring.
And he supported
the
her.
kind of message of not... Sorry?
He was just very supportive of her and what she wanted.
Yeah.
And
And the whole kind of message of not judging a book by its cover was quite a nice one, I thought.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I thought it was really cute how when I think she fell or something and he said, "Holy Christmas," instead of a swear.
Yeah. And we haven't talked about the very minor character of the social media manager that she has at the beginning.
Yeah.
She was quite an amusing character. Just the worst person in the world.
Even during it, she's like, "I just uploaded a tweet. Have I been kidnapped? Hashtag Shawn Mendes."
Hashtag. All of the tweets had hashtag Shawn Mendes.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, and then at the end, when they're on their little yoga retreat, Sandra Bullock is going to write another book. She's been inspired by their true adventure to do a new book, and so Dash will live on, which is nice.
Yes.
So yeah, as Josh was saying, there is quite a lot of meta stuff in it. Like you have the kind of book continuity and the film continuity, and they both kind of feed into each other. It's quite clever, I thought.
Yeah, I think it was a good mindless Hollywood movie.
Yeah, and you do have to put a lot of thought into something to make it mindless.
Yes,
because I absolutely think that's true. Because if you don't put any thought into it, then you get plot holes, you get inconsistencies, and that's where your mind will go. But to just be able to switch off and watch it and enjoy it for an hour and a half does require a good amount of effort. So I think props to the cast and crew.
The other thing that we haven't really mentioned is the whole character growth of Sandra Bullock, Loretta, is that she quit her dissertation when her husband died, and that's when she started writing these romance novels where she's sort of stuck in the past and reliving her relationship with her archaeologist husband. And through the course of the movie, she sort of makes peace with that and learns how to move on. And we have the story of the actual archaeological king and queen, which is paralleling that, right? So we have, I mean, it would otherwise be a little bit of a cliche that the bad guy is looking for gold, and it turns out that the gold is actually the love between the king and the queen. Not that interesting an idea, but because it's running parallel with this story of Loretta moving on from her husband, and then what helps her move on is seeing this queen who locked herself up in a literal stone tomb because she couldn't move on, and learning that, that's what her life is going to be, just locking herself in a tomb and never moving on. So she puts her wedding ring into the coffin with the couple before they escape. And then she moves on, and that's why she's able to have the relationship with Channing Tatum afterwards. So, like you said, like some of it is cliche, but it's got that sort of extra level to it where it's very well written, and it's like you said, a nice mindless movie to watch that's just nice and funny. But like it's good. It's so mindless because it is so well written, and everything ties together really nicely.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, what do we think about this movie in the end?
I liked it. I thought it was good. It's one I would have. Yeah,
I did. I thought it was fun. I would give it half an Encino Man.
Is that good or bad?
That's good. Yeah.
So it's not out of 5 Encino Mans.
No.
I'd like to see how this one ages, because I really liked it. I like comedies, but like the style of comedy is very like current. It's very sort of improvised feeling. And I like it a lot, but I'd like to see how it holds up to the movies that it's inspired by, like Indiana Jones and Romancing the Stone, which again I haven't seen, but seems to be a popular movie.
Maybe we could put it on the list.
Absolutely. We'll put Romancing the Stone on the list. We'll put Lost City of Zed on the list. Even though I've seen the Lost City of Zed, there isn't all that much archaeology in it. Because of course he goes missing before he finds it. But before we go here, we were in touch with another podcast, and we decided to trade promos with them. There's a podcast called Firebreathing Kittens. It's a D&D style RPG playthrough podcast. I know you guys probably have played D&D because we're all nerds here, or other tabletop games. They have very long episodes, which is great when you're doing PhD research and you're sitting there taking measurements for 8 hours a day and you need to have something in your ears. So I've been listening to it. So Firebreathing Kittens is an actual play one-shot podcast that plays various tabletop role-playing games with a season-long plot. Because there's a beginning and an end to each week's story, you can start at any episode. Each week has a different combination of 4 from the same rotating cast of people. So join Firebreathing Kittens as they solve detective mysteries, attempt comedic banter, and enjoy friendship. If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.